Are we ready? There are two types of people in the world. Those who put everything into two categories and those who don't. I'm obviously one of the categorizers. And so the way I see it, there are two types of synth people in the world. Those who post internet pictures of cats on their synthesizers and those who don't. I'm one of those who doesn't. I'm not really a cat person. But I've always wanted to get an Octave Cat synthesizer. It's a cool little beast with a duophonic keyboard. They're not easy to find, but the internet is boundless, and so we started the hunt. It wasn't too long before we got a line on one. I was excited. In the synthesizer world, I am a cat person. When I get excited about a synthesizer, one of the first things I think is, what can we do to hot rod it? And so I started thinking that about this cat. But then I had to reconsider. Cat synthesizers are pretty rare, and besides that, they're great just as they are. Not only that, there are some people that would get angry if they knew we were modding one. In the synthy underbelly of the internet, there's an unwritten rule. Rule 0. Don't with cats. Here at Syntaur, we live to bring old synthesizers back to life. We find vintage keyboards wherever we can, and our crew restores them back to their original splendor. We also supply parts to tens of thousands of customers all around the world so that they can restore and repair their own keyboards. At our shop in Texas, we have on hand parts for the synths used by pros from the 1960s all the way to today's brand new keyboards. Our inside and out knowledge has made us known as the Synth Wizards. We do have a cat at home. Its name is Henry. It's about 170 years old in cat years. When my daughter Kayla was little, she decided she needed a kitten. Despite all the love it got, Henry climbed way up into a tree one day and, of course, couldn't get down. Finally, its luck ran out, and Henry plummeted to earth. Don't worry, there's a happy ending. Dad was there to catch it, to be the cat hero. A year or so later, Henry had 2 kittens, making it clear that our feline anatomy skills were somewhat lacking. Fast forward about 18 years, and Kayla is all grown up. Henry is all grown up. I'm even all grown up. And I'm on the hunt for a different sort of cat. I was surprised how hard it was to find a cat synthesizer. In all the keyboard collecting we've done over the years, we've ended up with none. But there's more than one way to skin a cat. So I reached out to several fellow synth nuts to see if they had any leads.
I don't see no cat. Where's the cat? Kitty! Kitty! Underneath here? Maybe under the Prophet 5. Kitty! Kitty, kitty, kitty! Kitty, kitty! Kitty! Cat? Cat? Sam, you know I'm allergic to cat. Achoo! Achoo! It's not here, Sam.
Unfortunately, I haven't got a clue of a whereabouts of an Octave Cat, but I have got a cat and a synth. Actually, that's a vocoder. I'm gonna try and mash them together a little bit. Go on, play. Play, Luna. Don't be shy, play on the keyboard. Ow, my legs! No.
Alas, I have still never seen a cat synthesizer, that is. Obviously, I've seen a cat. The closest I've got to it is this behind me on the wall, which is the demonstration record for the Cat SRM, the series revision model, and a little pamphlet there called Cat Lovers, which I got from David Frederick, also known as David Fredericks, because I interviewed him for my ARP documentary, Electromotive, the story of ARP instruments, and it transpired that after he left ARP, he went to Octave Electronics and worked on the Cat. So that's where I got that, and that's the closest I've got. I've still never played one.
I've made no progress. So I sent a message to one of our techs to see if he had any ideas. I was surprised by his response. He has a cat and a kitten. He agreed to bring them in so I could try them out firsthand while I continued my hunt. And seeing these different models of synths got me interested in the history of the company that made them. In the feline world, cute little kittens come first, and then they grow up into not-so-cute cats. In the synthesizer world, it happened in the opposite order. The cat came first in 1976. Then the following year, the kitten was born. They both came from a company called Octave Electronics, based on Long Island, New York. And, spoiler alert, as the company began releasing its products, there was definitely some cat fighting involved. The Cat was Octave's first product. It was a 2-oscillator monosynth, and if you're familiar with the ARP Odyssey, you'll feel right at home with the Cat. You can sync the oscillators, select AR or ADSR envelopes, switch the envelope into repeat mode, even play the keyboard duophonically. All just like the Odyssey. The Kitten is a single oscillator monosynth, basically a scaled-down version of the Cat. If you're familiar with the ARP Axe, you'll feel right at home with the Kitten. You can mix the different waveforms from the oscillator, switch the envelope into repeat mode, use a sample and hold generator, all just like the Axe. If you're beginning to see a theme here, you're not the first. The folks at ARP Instruments noticed this same theme back in the 70s. Their director of engineering, in fact, claimed that the duophonic keyboard circuitry of the Cat was lifted directly from the Odyssey service manual. It didn't take long for ARP to file a lawsuit against Octave Electronics, claiming that Octave had blatantly copied ARP's patented designs. As it turns out, Carmine Bonanno, Octave's founder and the designer of the Cat, showed that his keyboard circuitry was designed prior to ARP's patent, and the lawsuit was dropped. A couple of years later, ARP filed for bankruptcy and went out of business, while Octave merged with Plateau Electronics and released the mighty Voyetra 8 synthesizer. That company later merged with software company Turtle Beach, who had created software for the Ensoniq Mirage and VFX, and which today is a leading manufacturer of gaming headsets and other products. But let's move beyond the cat fighting and get on to the synthesizers. While there are indeed many similarities between the Cat and the Odyssey, the Cat brought to the table many of its own features that the Odyssey didn't have. For instance, it included a sub-oscillator for each of the VCOs. And you can mix the amount of each waveform coming from the oscillators to create more complex waveforms. On the Odyssey, you have a switch to select either sawtooth or square wave for each VCO, but on the Cat, you have a slider to mix the waveforms. Unfortunately, one area where the Cat is very similar to the Odyssey is in its lack of intuitive pitch bend and modulation controllers. There's no mod wheel, nor a PPC controller like on the later Odysseys. And the only control for pitch bending is a slide pot with a dead spot in the center. A cumbersome setup at best. The filter on the Cat can have a really sharp bite when you crank up the resonance, or Q as it's labeled on the panel. It's a 24 dB per octave low-pass filter, and it was made of discrete components in the early Cats, and then was based upon SSM 2040 chips in later versions and in the Kitten. And here's another place where the Cat is different from the Odyssey. Its filter can sound really warm, more like a mini Moog than an art filter. The filter on the Cat is beastly, but one other thing I really love about it is the sync feature on it. You can sync oscillator 2 to oscillator 1 and get some really gnarly effects. Whoa! You can play the Cat like a normal monophonic synthesizer, where the 2 oscillators are detuned on each note. Or you can play it in duophonic mode, where you can play 2 notes at once, and in that instance, each note takes one of the oscillators. The Kitten is basically a scaled-down Cat, but it comes with some features that its grown-up sibling doesn't have. Even though it only has 1 oscillator, there are 2 sub-oscillators, so you can add in pitch an octave lower and 2 octaves lower. The LFO section includes a delay slider to add a natural-sounding vibrato that only comes in after a note is held for a time. And while there is still only a slider for pitch bending, at least on the Kitten, there's a detent in the center to give some tactile feedback of where the nominal pitch is. The Cat and the Kitten we've been playing belong to Ron, a new tech we have here at Syntaur. He has a pretty amazing collection of vintage synthesizers, and it's great to have him on board with us. Ron stepped in to help out in a crisis. If 2020 wasn't a crazy enough year already, with a worldwide pandemic and social unrest, we made it a bit crazier by buying a new building, then completely finishing out the interior, and moving the whole company. And in the middle of all that, we lost Gerald. He passed away due to heart failure. Ron graciously started coming in when he could to help us keep things rolling, and he's been coming in ever since. He's become an invaluable member of the Syntaur team. As it turns out, Ron is also a car enthusiast, just like I am. So when he pulled up in his DeLorean one day, it sure got my attention. Ron, I'm calling you out. Your DeLorean against my old Stingray. We'll pick a time and a place. We'll put a keyboard at the finish line. First one to the keyboard's a winner.
Time is not a problem. You name the place.
All right, let's lock it in.
All right, drivers, listen up. You know the rules. It's going to be an arm drop, 2 water burnouts only, chases the race. Any questions? Okay, meet at the starting line in 5 minutes.
We okay on tire pressure? All good. Check the bottle?
Got it.
All right, good. I'm going to put a good A to B tune in it.
Good luck. I love you.
Thank you.
This keyboard will mark the finish line.
How did you get here so soon?
Brand new flux capacitor. Just charged it up and here I was.
Finally, our cat hunt led us to rural New York for a true barn find. Someone literally found a cat synthesizer in a barn, along with some other instruments. We picked up a lot of other keyboards, and we were there at the perfect time of year for the changing colors of the autumn leaves. So it's not like we drove 4,000 miles round trip just for the cat. But I was sure excited that I was finally getting one. It's an SRM model, and it needed a bit of love and kindness. The Cat SRM was the result of Carmine Bonanno redesigning the keyboard circuitry in 1977. Did he redesign it because of the lawsuit from ARP, or did he just feel like he needed to improve the keyboard? It's not clear what the motivation was, but the result was certainly a much better duophonic design. I wish that SRM stood for something snappy and exciting, but it stands for Series Revision Model. Nonetheless, the SRM did add some snappy and exciting features. It was released around the same time as the Kitten, and it included the Kitten's delayed vibrato feature. But it was the duophonic playing mode that was really improved, and here's why. With normal monophonic playing, two oscillators are mixed together to play each note. Those oscillators can be slightly detuned for a fat sound, or they can be tuned to an interval to give each note a quartal character. On the original Cat, and likewise on the ARP Odyssey, you can play two notes at once, duophonically, and the keyboard circuitry assigns one oscillator to each note. Now, if you're sustaining two notes, and then you release only one of them, the released notes oscillator jumps back to doubling up on the remaining note. This can be a rather abrupt and unwanted effect, especially noticeable on sounds with a long release time. Bonanno's new circuit did away with this problem. It essentially remembered the released note, even though it wasn't being played any longer. This made the duophonic keyboard work more like a synth with two-note polyphony, if you will, and it's much more natural to play this way. If you're playing duophonically with a noticeable release time, and you lift up from one key, it sustains at the same pitch rather than suddenly jumping to the pitch of the other key. In 1979, as Octave was merging with Plateau Electronics, one more product was released by the company. It was called the Cat Stick, and it was basically a box that was used for adding modulation capabilities to the Cat, the Kitten, or to any synthesizer with patching capabilities. The main control feature was a joystick, and the box contains two LFOs and 4 VCAs, and it can all be patched in just like a modular synth. In fact, that's just what Michael Boddicker uses his with. A Cat Stick is a pretty rare find these days. With the Octave Plateau merger complete, the Cat line of products ended, and a powerful new polyphonic synth, the Voyetra 8, became the focus. But that's a story for another day. As I mentioned earlier, we recently moved into a new building, Our old place was just bursting at the seams, and the tech room was especially getting unmanageable.
Check that out. It glides. It shouldn't be doing that. You can't keep it straight.
Jeez. I don't know how you guys have room to work in this place. There's so much stuff, so many keyboards piled up and leaned up against the walls, and I think you just need to make it your mission to cut this stuff in half. At least.
Well, you heard him right. His exact words were, cut it in half.
That's what he said.
Cat synthesizers are fairly uncommon, but they still have some notable users. Mark Mothersbaugh of Devo used one, as did Eddie Rayner of the Split Ends. More recently, Square Pusher uses a cat and even shows it on the cover of the Hello Everything album. And King Gizmo of the Dust Brothers has 2 of them in his insane collection of synthesizers. When we got our new Cat SRM back to the shop, it still had some meow in it, but it was obviously ailing in some ways. Carlos took a close look at the circuit boards and saw that a number of electrolytic capacitors were bulging, meaning that they were beginning to fail. So he went through and replaced all of those, along with recapping the power supply. While a bad capacitor in the sound circuitry can cause the synth to act wonky, bad capacitors in a power supply might cause the voltage that is sent out to the rest of the synth to be dangerously high. And that overvoltage can fry IC chips and other components. Because many vintage synths rely on now obsolete ICs to make their noises, we generally recap the power supplies of any project synths to keep them happy and healthy. Another thing we do as a matter of course is to clean all of the potentiometers and switches. Sometimes what seems like an electronic failure is really just a switch or a pot that's so dirty it's causing the circuit not to work. A quick shot of contact cleaner and a bit of exercise can often work wonders. One problem with this synth is that either the previous owner lost the end cap screws or decided that they should be replaced with nice new shiny ones. Why is that a big deal? Here, I'll show you. These are crazy long. You have to consider, where is all that screw going when it's installed? Well, it's going right into the circuit board. A CAT scan would show that this screw is pushing right into a capacitor on the main board, which then gets pushed into a resistor, which tries to resist, but ultimately gets broken in two from the pressure. Hey guys, we have a keyboard that has key problems. About half the keys aren't working. Could y'all take a look at it real quick and see if you can fix it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Once all the electronics were working correctly, there were just two things left to do. The Cat uses a Pratt Reed key bed, like many synths of that era, and the rubber key bushings have gotten hard and brittle over the years. So our other new tech, Nick, went through and replaced them all with brand new bushings. At the same time, he cleaned the bus bars and straightened out any bent J-wires to make sure that the key bed works reliably. The final step in the restoration process is a good calibration. And like many synth calibrations, this one had Carlos pulling his hair out for a while.
It went well, surprisingly, up until the very end. And then that's when things got a little hairy. Specifically, it was the scaling. You know, the way the octaves, the spread of each note, it got to a point where you could play the middle octaves and they were in tune. But once you got to the either extremes of it, it was very audibly off. You know, electronically speaking, taking all of our measurements on the electronics and on the boards, everything was exactly where it should be. And that's what made it all that much more mysterious and frustrating. And there were a couple of red herrings in there too. You know, when you get so focused on a problem, it's very easy to get sidelined and think, oh, this symptom, if I fix this is gonna fix everything else, when it's a non-starter. It has nothing to do with the problem to begin with. There wasn't anything wrong with any of the components. What it was the board was a little bit dirty. And so all it took was actually a little bit of isopropyl rubbing alcohol and a toothbrush. And the instrument calibrated right up. And it was probably the most relieving, you know, just weight off my chest I've ever experienced in my life. The calibration procedures in the service manual, they leave some very critical parts open to interpretation, where they should be more specific with the wording. They just kind of left it out in the open, and it was like, well, what do you mean there, Mr. Engineer from 40 years ago? So that was another part, was kind of interpreting what the engineers meant when they say something like 0 beat, you know, which means in tune.
Finally, this cat is really purring, so let's take it for a little spin. One of the things I like a lot about the cat is what we mentioned on the kitten. It's got the LFO delay. And so what that means is you can play a note, you can have some LFO dialed in to add vibrato, but it fades in naturally rather than as always on. So let me show you what I'm talking about. I can do that with one hand without having to dedicate my left hand to adding modulation. So that's a really sweet basic feature of it, but it's really wonderful. The filter on the cat can really be biting and fun, and you can play with the cutoff and with the Q or the resonance at the same time and really get some crazy effects. It's really gnarly. One unique thing about the cat is that you can cross mod each oscillator from the oscillator next to it. So in other words, you can use VCO2 to modulate VCO1. You can use VCO1 to modulate VCO2. Let me show you what's going on. So this is a normal patch. And now I'm going to switch that and start modulating VCO1 from VCO2. So you can get some real metallic ring mod kind of sounds, and then if you want to go just totally insane, at the same time, you can cross modulate VCO2 from VCO1. Crazy. So there's a famous mini-moog trick where you can take the audio output, plug it into the audio input, and then take the output again. So you're basically overdriving the synth and getting a gnarly distortion. You can do that on the cat too. So here's a regular sound before. And now let's do some replugging and see what trouble we can get into. Dirty and nasty. So here's something cool that you can do on the cat that I don't think you can do on any other synthesizer that I'm aware of. You can set up a program that's sort of an arpeggiator, even though this is a monophonic synth without an arpeggiator. So here's what's happening, and it's all based on the fact that you can cross-modulate the oscillators. So what I have here is just oscillator 2 playing by itself. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to modulate it from oscillator 1. But I have oscillator 1 turned all the way down in frequency so that it's actually subsonic. So you won't even hear it. You just hear some ticks. And so I'm going to use this to modulate oscillator 2, and I'm going to start with the sub-octave. And the sub-oscillator is just a square wave, and so as we apply this as a modulator, now you can do that with a LFO set to a square wave on a lot of synths, but I'm not doing it with the LFO, I'm doing it with VCO1. And the cool thing now is, since I'm doing that with the sub-oscillator, which is a square wave, now I can dial in also the square wave of that oscillator, and it's going to be going at twice the frequency of the sub-oscillator, and so here's what you get as a result. Get a cool little arpeggiator patch. And since I'm not using the LFO at all, now I can dial it in, and I have it going to a sample and hold on the filter, and so now we can really get extra crazy when we pull that in. What other synth can you do that on? Now, if you do have a Cat synthesizer, you're definitely going to want to work on programming this sound. We got the ADSR envelope. I have that set just right, and I'm sending the ADSR to control the pitch of oscillator 1. I'm also using it to control the filter, so it's opening up the filter, and as you can see, I have the filter cut off pretty low, and so it's opening it up. You're really hearing just all the envelope, and I have the filter resonance kind of up a bit. And the other thing that's kind of important to this sound in a subtle way is I have the LFO going slowly, and that's fading in after a little bit, and it's just adding a bit of random wiggle to the sound. And so let's see what this cat can talk about. The cat's meow. Now, let's see if we can make some music using nothing but the Cat SRM. We brought home a stray cat that had been living in a barn, and we nursed it back to health. Brand new key bushings make the key bed feel 100 times better, and refinishing the wood end panels gave it a really rich look.
A few components on the main board literally got screwed, but we got the right hardware to make sure that never happens again.
And now that this Cat SRM is really purring, I'm wondering if there's something we can do to add some cool extra features.
Sam, don't with cats.
Darn roads.
Roads? Where we're going, we don't need roads.
Alright, I hope y'all enjoy your trip out to Syntaur Farm.
We need to plant a few more of those trees.
Alright, we get them all up here. Y'all think we buy them, but we grow them. We grow them just right. Look at it. Alright, we hope y'all enjoy your trip out to Syntaur Farm. Y'all come back down here.